Welcome back, everybody. You got Will and I Man here from the Block Runner, MetaZone, and Rovi, and today we're going to be talking about PUBG and the Metaverse.
Yes, we are, dude. So what do you know about PUBG, Willis?
PUBG is first, I guess, the innovator of the Battle Royale, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
So have you ever played?
I've never played PUBG, but I've seen people play it.
What have you played, Fortnite or any of the other Battle Royale variants?
I've played them, but I never really got into it.
So you didn't like them?
I mean, I like the idea of it, like the Battle Royale concept. It's a great mechanic.
Kind of like Hunger Games-ish.
Yeah.
You just drop people into like an environment.
It's great.
And watch them all kill each other until there's the last man standing.
That's why I really like DayZ, like the idea of DayZ.
It is cool.
Yeah.
And it's been fun, and it's obviously, it took over the whole gaming, like, ethos.
It did.
Like, every developer just trying to churn out, like, a different variant of this game style, because whatever reason, the last 10 years, that's been, like, the it thing.
Well, not only that, I mean, Fortnite just took that idea and ran with it and made a multi-billion-dollar game out of it.
And now everybody like looks at Fortnite as like the true metaverse, right?
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah. I mean, they had a concert in there that was extremely successful with what's his name?
Travis Scott.
Travis Scott.
Marshmello. I think they do all kinds of stuff now too. So
Marshmello was really interesting.
Yeah, Fortnite's pushing the envelope as far as like, I guess, entertainment value of like virtual environments where you could host like, you know, live events, but in a virtual sense, and you know, attract millions of eyeballs to these events and stuff like that, and create spectacles that you can't recreate in real life. Right? You can't have giant Travis Scotts trampling the universe.
Yeah,
not here, but in the metaverse you can. So,
and then you were explaining an experience you had in World of Warcraft where there was a sort of like a funeral and it got raided.
Yeah. That was a classic moment. I mean, you could potentially do that in the real world if you really were like an evil fuck.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the metaverse, there's, you know, minimal repercussions, stuff like that. But yeah, which is why it's so fun, and like the prospects of I guess mature, well adopted metaverses just seems like such a
it's just a different
obvious
kind of
thing, right? It's imminent, right?
Yeah.
But how do we get there? It's a struggle, dude. It's tough.
Yeah,
and PUBG has their own, I guess, interpretation.
Yeah, so they've created this thing called a prologue, right? An open world survival game on a massive 40 square mile map.
Sounds pretty big.
It's very big.
Has anybody ever done the Decentraland calculations?
Yeah, Decentraland is about the size of...
It's like Manhattan or something like that?
Yeah. It's about that size, which is it's pretty big.
It's probably roughly something like that, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Nonetheless, it's a pretty big open world environment, so they want to create a whole survival ecosystem, which is, I mean, that's PUBG.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's called Prologue because it's sort of like a prototype to their next creation called Artemis, which is their metaverse.
Great name. Which,
by the way, is an Earth-size virtual sandbox.
Okay.
So pretty large. So I quickly is like, okay, Prologue is 40 square miles big. How many square miles is Earth? Just out of curiosity. So I Googled it, 196 million. And this is, I think, just the surface area of Earth, not of like land.
Yeah.
Right. So
clearly, like at first gut instinct, seems like an almost impossible task, right? To recreate Earth in all of its glory and all of its properties and like physicalities and whatever the fuck, right? But that's why they want to create like a sandbox-esque environment potentially, right? So they don't have to have all that creative burden on their own shoulders. You just kind of give, I don't know, a community like the foundational pieces to start constructing whatever it is you think needs to exist in this Earth-like environment. It doesn't have to be rivers and
no, it doesn't have
banks
to be.
and lakes. It's all the things we're familiar on this planet. It doesn't have to be that.
Yeah.
Right? But nonetheless, it's still interesting because the thing that sticks out to me is their blockchain incorporation to all of this, right? This is the first time I've heard like a pretty mainstream like development front.
Yes.
Like really understanding what we've been talking about, right? Like the whole Web3 necessity.
Yeah. And not only that, they're also talking about making it open source, making it available for creators to make content, which is why we're talking about it.
Yeah.
And but what's interesting here is part of the article says the technology to create something like Artemis doesn't even exist yet. So in the article, it talks about like a 10 to 15 year roadmap for something like this, which is a pretty long time.
Yeah. We've seen examples of, I guess, 10-year initiatives to build technology, like from Improbable.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest metaverse player at the moment, Improbable and M Squared.
Yeah.
Because they spent the last 10 years developing what could potentially be like a cornerstone pillar to, like, you know, a mature metaverse ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
The ability to bring in tens of thousands of users into like shareable spaces.
Yeah.
You know, that could be a bare necessity, right? So they've built that, they developed it, now they're leveraging it and building a whole ecosystem on top of that, right? So what they're proposing is like utilizing or creating a whole new engine.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. It's called Melba, and it's propped up by machine learning. And so I think this is how they're going to populate the entire surface area of the world.
Yeah.
In a way where it's unique, but it doesn't require every single little placement like manually, right?
See, Decentraland kind of had Decentraland created a Manhattan-esque sized virtual world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at first it was a grid, nothing.
Yeah.
But at some point in time, they're like, listen, we don't want to wait for landowners to populate their land. Let's just put, some kind of environment in the world itself.
Yeah.
Now, do you think they use machine learning for that? Probably not, right?
No, definitely not. It's just a randomized set of like plots, and then they just
like with some has like a rock here, some has a rock there.
That's right.
One might have a tree, one might not, stuff like that, right? So obviously that method probably makes much more sense in a much more condensed environment. Yeah, we're talking Earth scale.
Yeah.
There's got to be like variability and like different environments, all this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, here's where they talk about 10 to 15 year estimation for something like this. And it says we're building a digital place. That has to have an economy, and it has to have a systems at work. So that's something we're always talking about, right? In order to have an economy, you need these systems in place, and you need the components that make up that system.
Yeah.
And so the fact that they're making an open source sort of platform for creators, it's a huge opportunity to actually facilitate an economy.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we were talking about that represented a pretty well developed economy was RuneScape, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was just checking out that game earlier today, and saw a bunch of people like grinding away.
Yeah,
right?
Just hitting rocks, right?
Hitting rocks, yeah.
What do you think they're doing with those rocks they're hitting?
Well, they're collecting, I guess, the base resource, and then they're going to be crafting items, and then eventually selling them.
Yeah, or they just sell the rocks themselves, to people who don't want to put in that sweat labor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess
these are essential layers to economic activities. You know what I mean? There's different stratas of participation, and that's the thing. You don't really when you're trying to create like a metaverse economy. You can kind of lay forth and make those stratas more understood, or you can just lay foundational ground pieces and let the community build those on their own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those rocks could be potentially valuable to craft. I don't know. Depending on what those rocks are.
Yeah, depending on what they are. But it also depends on what you're crafting and what you're allowed to craft based on the developers, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so too. I wonder how much developers can actually get involved, like third-party developers, because maybe they'll say okay, there's these resources throughout the land, and I'm going to create a game where you utilize those resources, and here's my crafting system, or here's my recipes versus, I guess, a built-in recipes if it has any.
Yeah.
But the idea here is that you want creators to facilitate their own economies, because if you're building the economy yourself as a business, as a team, you'll never finish, right?
So can you do this without Web3? Can you do a Roblox type model, or I
think you can, but I don't know if so. I guess your question is, can you do this without Web3 in the context of can you create an economy without Web3?
Yeah, basically.
I don't know.
I mean, you can create some sort of value economy, right? Just like Roblox has, like we've said in the past, if you actually go deep into who's actually earning the bulk of the earnings from that ecosystem, it's less than 500 people, right? Creators, they make a product, they're leveraging, I guess, the available components to that ecosystem to create engaging content, fun things to do, and then they monetize that at the end of it.
Yeah.
So that layer of the strata of participation, right? That's the creator layer. They got it knocked it out the park, dude.
Yeah.
I guess like 500 sounds kind of small, but still, nonetheless, like, you have the potential to be one of those 500. Yeah. Like if you can produce good enough content. Sure. That's a great creator strata. But like when you go into Roblox as a participant or player, like did you gain anything the time you logged out?
Right.
In most cases, it's a no. Yeah. I mean, if you spent a bunch of money to support these creators, buying their goods, their skins, whatever, all you did was kind of like lose value at the end of the day. You gained like digital value, but it's not actual value. It's not your value.
Had they been NFTs, you could have at least potentially flipped it or upgraded it or created some sort of value that somebody else might want to pay money for.
Exactly. No, now you're a participant. Like you're part of the market. Yeah. You're not just a user or like, a consumer of things that these creators who are making so much money doing, for good cause because you need them to create the engaging content. But there's everybody within the world economy needs like their end, their get. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You
can't have a real economy, I think, without Web3. That has to be widely understood. It's good to see Artemis like along that path. Yeah. Because I haven't heard that much from Zuckerberg. He hints at things like NFTs and stuff like that, but he hasn't, I think, fully committed yet. I don't know.
No, definitely not. But I think it's an essential part of creating that economy. Yeah. And then so if you're wondering, it's like, why would anyone care about a digital economy or a game economy? Let me explain to you how deep it can get. So in 2007, a woman in New York City placed an ad on Craigslist offering sex in exchange for 5,000 gold in World of Warcraft to purchase an epic flying mount. Wow. So that's how deep it went in terms of like the desire to gain these like digital assets. And these weren't even NFTs.
That's true.
Right?
But there was just so much value and demand for like, I guess this class of asset, the World of Warcraft gold, because I mean, there's work and effort that goes into obtaining that. I know. I remember to get that epic flying mount took me like a month. Yeah. A month of like maybe 8 hour a day activity. That is a lot of work. Yeah. That needs to be translated to real world value, right? That has to be exchangeable between participants. Like for people who, in this case would rather have sex than put in a month of like digital slave labor to acquire that in-demand good, which is the flying mount.
And it makes sense. If you see somebody in the game in the flying mount, that they either spent time grinding or they purchased it and through, hard cash.
Exactly.
Right. Or work in this case.
Yeah. And the flying mount, I mean, dude, that's a core component to the economy. Without a flying mount, you can't go up there or there's like a mining spigot or whatever the fuck. There's something up there to mine. Like you just can't obtain it unless you have a flying mount or there's a whole parts of the game like you need flying mounts to access. So,
but what's sort of like a requirement for
kind of like having a car in the real world. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It enables new opportunities. Yeah. But what's important is that games like this, like World of Warcraft, they were fun to play. And so your friends were involved, and therefore your friends are in it, you want to be in it. Mm-hmm. It may not be enough just to create that economy of like resource, work labor, and all that if it's not fun, right? So that's, I think, another element that we don't really talk about often.
Fun, yeah.
I guess fun, I know where you're going with this. Is like, the West is looking for fun. Well, everyone else is not looking for opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be fun components. There has to be purpose. Again, fun can be a part of purpose. Like you could just find identity of purpose in many different realms. It's not just like how much fun you're having. It's
did you find it fun to grind? Like, was that a fun factor for you in playing World of Warcraft? Or
you can make it a fun. It's much better than grinding like life. Well, I guess it's kind of the same thing. You could just, if you're in a job, right, you could just slap in some earphones or whatever, just crank away at it for like 8-9 hours a day. Then just going home. Yeah. You do the same thing in the digital sense. You just killing mobs, raking up loot, going to vendors, selling this stuff. It's a replication of the same labor intensities almost, and commitment, mental commitment, time commitment, all that stuff.
So if World of Warcraft had enabled the Web3 at that time, would that made of a difference for you? Like, would it change like how engaged you were?
That would, of course, that would make things like insane. But I think then it'd be ultra competitive because it wouldn't be sustainable in that infrastructure because I don't think they'd be able to support the amount of like onboarding
resources
that would attract. Yeah, I mean.
Oh, really?
Oh, of course.
It would attract more people. You're saying?
I think so because then because they had like a labor economy, a black market one, right? Where the majority of people who were doing all these tasks were like, people from China or like all these, underdeveloped parts of the world. And they were doing these tasks and, they're funneling all these resources to their bosses and whatever. And they were getting paid,
actual shekels.
Unlivable wages in a lot of cases because they did like investigations. These were sweatshops, these are people in poor conditions, right? So if you enable Web3, all of a sudden those people can work for themselves. Yeah. They don't need a boss, they could just be participants now and actually claim that ownership themselves and then just freely trade on the market and actually get out of those types of conditions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have a shot at like something a little more sensibly, livable and humane.
I guess where I'm trying to get at is that people have to decide to participate in that ecosystem versus a different one, right? Versus a competing game.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that factor is where are all the people at? Right.
Yeah, it's just you're trying to identify like what's the demand, right? Like what's driving demand?
Yeah. Why World of Warcraft and not RuneScape if they were competing at the same time?
Yeah, and they both had viable, healthy economies. So it's just different demographics. Some people just liked RuneScape, others liked WoW.
Yeah, yeah.
They're essentially like the same like economic schemes, fantasy worlds and all that stuff, but just different experiences at the end of the day, different cultures, different.
Yeah, because I figured if you had a friend group, right, that went into RuneScape versus World of Warcraft, I feel like you would have gone into RuneScape.
But I never did because I became. Why would I go? You get so invested in one of these experiences.
No, I'm saying
you can't.
But did you play with like real life friends in World of Warcraft?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so that's.
But
why
I made more digital friends than real friends in World of Warcraft for sure. And I think that's usually what ends up happening. Like you literally just you're in that world.
Yeah.
You forget about. There have been many cases where I forgot my real world friends from my digital ones.
I guess the reason why this is important is because I think in the future there's going to be many more virtual worlds.
Yeah.
And you're actually going to have to decide which one do you get into. Mm-hmm. I guess it's going to play up. The demographics are going to play a part, right? You wouldn't get into a world where it's like activities that you're not interested in, right? So
that and. Of course, market demands. Is there an opportunity here? Just like any in the real world economic sense, like, am I going to go to I don't know some remote part of the world that has much minimal economic opportunity? Probably not, because I can't sustain a livelihood there. It's going to be mostly suffering, you know. So, or do I go to somewhere with an abundance of opportunity? I have a chance to, find my place in that economic spectrum strata of participation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is going to be all part of all the
components
of
how you onboard masses into an ecosystem.
Yeah, but the point is, first we got to like get the foundations down, and the fact that what I'm hearing from Artemis, it sounds very good and like pretty much in alignment with what we're thinking. Is going to be necessary to build, like even have a chance at seeing these types of economies emerge. But the fact that We're like pre-engine phase. Where there's like no real standard engines that metaverse developers can utilize.
Absolutely.
It kind of puts like a reality check on the whole industry, right? Like, dude, this is where we are, and this is how much work it's going to take to even get us to even like the point where we can expect like economic onboarding.
Yeah, because eventually these societies are going to compete with the GDP of nations.
Absolutely.
But according to Artemis and the team, they got 10 years to actually roll this out.
Yeah, and we've seen other technical layers that it takes 10 years plus to really hone in on, and it takes time. A ton of funding.
The internet really started in the 70s.
Yeah.
And it didn't really take off until like the mid 90s.
Yeah.
And so, it's just technology is going to take time.
So we're in the technology era for the metaverse for sure. So
for sure.
Like that has to be our responsibility as, leaders,
Yep.
Also innovators ourselves, but also like informers for you guys watching and listening. Like we have to identify important technical components to what can enable like real economies at scale to exist in the virtual, Yeah. So that's what we're going to be looking forward to. I think we're going to see a lot more projects like this emerge over the next couple of years, pre-bull market, and then like, infrastructure projects for the metaverse. So
yeah. Most important thing here is that open source, a world that anyone can modify, and with a decentralized ownership. So potentially tokens involved here, and a whole DAO infrastructure as well.
Yep.
And so that's
it was interesting. During that AI Day event with Elon Musk during his presentation, they sounded like he was like begging to like tokenize like aspect. Like he kept emphasizing the fact that like this can't be under like Tesla's control, like this technology. Yeah. It needs to be like democratically governed.
True, dude. Yeah.
Like he was basically like pleading to the world, like we need to tokenize everything, because the stuff they're building, like he shouldn't be the end all be all determinate factor to like the trajectory of it. Yeah. Like he needs to be a communal, globally agreed upon decision making process.
Yeah, just like nobody really owns Bitcoin, like the network itself. Nobody can own like robots and the control of their ability to update their software. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be any one entity, because if that entity gets compromised, all of a sudden we got murderers in our house. Oh, wow. Right?
Yeah.
And so
I think he sees that, and I think at some point he's gonna lean towards tokenization, blockchain, as a solution.
And then it's going to be open source so that it's secure, right? Yeah. We got as many eyeballs on it as possible.
Yep.
But anyway, that's been PUBG in the Metaverse and Artemis. Let us know what you guys think about, I guess, the existence of the Metaverse, and like the fact that we're going to have a world-sized Metaverse here in the future. Follow us on Twitter at The Block Runner, at Metazone.io, and at Roby AI, and we will catch you in the next video.
Peace.